I can say is, wow, what did we just witness last night with this fight? I'm still trying to process the fact that Logan Paul, the guy that the internet hates, which in my opinion, by the way, I think he's really trying to reverse that. Just the way that he's been speaking lately, the way he's been composing himself, but really the guy that, the two brothers, so to speak, right? The brand that they've been building that people just love to hate, love to root against them, ended up fighting one of, if not the greatest boxer of all time, who ironically enough, also built his brand and his image off of people wanting to see him lose. Now, in my opinion, this was a win-win for both of them, right? In terms of an entertaining aspect, was it a loss for the sport of boxing? In my opinion, obviously, at least not myself, I didn't see this going into it as the most technical bout. I don't think that maybe if you're watching this, you didn't either. Do I think that for the sport of boxing, was this a bad look? Well, we already know what Canelo had to say about that, right? He wasn't really too fond of this. But on the other side of that, what does this do for the business of boxing? Because boxing, the sport of boxing is one thing, but the business of boxing is something completely different. Now, there's really two reactions that I wanted to focus on before really getting into what I think is next for Logan Paul and what this actually does for his career, apart from obviously Mayweather being established, and what this does for combat sports as a whole. This morning, Joe Rogan decided to put out a message regarding what he thought about last night's bout. Now I'm gonna skim read through this right here, but I'm gonna have it on your screen so that you can follow along as well. Joe Rogan writes in his Instagram post this morning about last night. First off, I have to say I was really surprised at how much I was looking forward to the fight. Right before the bell rang for the opening round, I was legitimately giddy with excitement. I think the whole thing is pretty fascinating. I can agree with him on that. First of all, Floyd Mayweather is an effing genius, and in more ways than one. He's arguably the greatest boxer of all time. In the twilight of his career, he managed to make hundreds of millions of dollars fighting people who really don't have a chance to beat him. Just an effing genius. He's figured out a way to compete into his 40s and make more money than any other boxer alive. Pause right there. I couldn't agree with that. I couldn't agree with him more. And the fact that they were able to sell this fight to an audience that knew already what the outcome was. They knew Logan Paul didn't stand a chance. They knew, we all knew, let's be honest here, there's maybe a 1% chance. Obviously, it's a fight, kind of like Sylvester Stallone says, right? You know, I think he's being sarcastic when he said it. Every man has two hands in that ring. Anything is possible. But did we really think that he would be able to land a clean shot on Floyd? Probably not. I want to fast forward down to and skip to right when he mentions Logan Paul, because I couldn't agree with him more. And for Logan Paul, just going 8 rounds with a superb multi-division world champion like Floyd is pretty effing incredible. He survived, and he even managed to land a few punches. Just the fact that he had the endurance to do this, or to do 8 rounds, is really effing impressive when you're in there with a master like Floyd constantly pressuring you, and he's so efficient and composed and he never fades. But this last part, really, I think we can all attest to this, and that's this. Yes, it was a freak show, and yes, the real world-class boxing between champions is better, but I thought it was pretty effing interesting. Kudos to them. Hold that thought, because there may be a smaller portion of us thinking that way than, and really a larger portion of us thinking how Francis Ngannou, what he had to say about this. And this is the part that I really want to draw some attention to, because I think that this is starting to shape the way that we see combat sports and entertainment kind of merging as one. Watch this. He writes in his tweet last night, "It's crazy to think that Logan Paul, 0-1, just made $20 million in an exhibition fight. What are we doing wrong?" Okay, let's start there. First of all, I see both sides of the board. I agree that it was a freak show, but on the other side of that, I think that we all paid for entertainment in terms of what this fight had to provide. Obviously, the lead up, the gotcha had, whether that was scripted or not, whether you believe that was real, all of that. Obviously, the size advantage coming in at 190 versus fighting Floyd. I think he came in right around 155, 160, give or take, and obviously 44 versus a 26-year-old. These are all things that kind of entertain us. Now, after the fight, I know that we've heard Mayweather say this quite a bit, right? Where he says, I like to challenge myself. If it's about the money, I'm going to do it. Obviously, money's important to me. It's a highway robbery, a legalized highway robbery. But after this fight, and I know that we've heard him say this a bunch of times, is he says, well, I don't think that I would necessarily be doing this, and I have no intent in coming back to boxing. Obviously, why would he want to absorb any more damage if he can get paid to, again, quote unquote, entertain and put on a show for us to watch? Now, what I think this does for the sport of boxing is, unfortunately, it kind of degrades it, because you have real fighters out there that are pound for pound multi-division champions that are barely making ends meet in terms of what we just finished watching last night, right? They're still making a good living, but versus a $20 million non-professional fighter, obviously at the caliber that Logan is in. This is his second fight, by the way, second professional fight. First was KSI, second was this one with Floyd Money Mayweather. We have to start to think now, what's going on with the UFC and what's going on with boxing? And the answer to that, I think, is going to come down to how marketable are some of these athletes. Because it's one thing to have the product that you're paying for, which is what we just want to see combat sports, right? We just want to see two guys get in there and duke it out. But why doesn't that sell kind of like what we had last night? So you see, in my opinion, I'm going to stick with my answer. I think that Logan Paul won that fight last night. Now, obviously, I'm not oblivious to the scorecards. I know that he only landed like 13% shots versus Mayweather landing right around 47%. Barely got a hit off on Floyd Mayweather. He looked tired, especially going past the third, fourth round. He obviously stuck it out, lasted all 8 rounds. But the fact that he lasted all 8 rounds with Floyd Mayweather, whether Floyd let him live or not, or whether Floyd was just playing with his food or not, the fact that he actually stayed in there all 8 rounds without pretty much gassing his tank out, I think that's pretty remarkable. Second to that, the fact that he was even able to land a few clean shots on Mayweather, whether it was 2 or 3, not that many for the full 24-minute bout, but nonetheless, I think that it was pretty impressive to see him get in there and get some of his licks in. But I think that the third reason why he ultimately won was he's really been able to tap into an audience and tap into what I can say a genre of entertainment that we have yet to really see. And I think it's really in its early stages, whether you like it or not. And that's going to be that celebrity matchup. When a celebrity gets in there with either your favorite fighter or where two celebrities have beef, quote unquote, and they get in there to duke it out. I think that we're starting to step into an interesting space when it comes to the business of boxing and the business of boxing and entertainment coming together. Not just two professional athletes that are training their butts off, that are going in there to make a living and knock each other's heads off. And I think that this is really going to start shaping how athletes, kind of like Francis Ngannou, which is probably the scariest guy in the UFC and in the world right now, the way that he strikes, the way that he moves, he's not able to get the payday that he wants with, again, probably the greatest of all time, arguably, John Jones, let alone you have these two guys coming together and they still can't get a payday. It leads you to ask the question, is it the fighter's issue or problem that they can't maybe build a bigger fan base that's willing to pay and actually sell some of these pay-per-view tickets? Or is the business broken as a whole? Because we know that Jake Paul has made some comments about that, kind of poking at Dana White, saying, hey, how about you pay your fighters a little bit more money? These are the guys that are really putting their lives on the line and actually putting the content out, aka the fight, which is kind of hard to imagine and hard to believe and really difficult to wrap your head around the fact that Jake Paul is about to give Tyron Woodley the biggest payday of his professional career. And again, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that a guy that's 3-0 is about to give a guy that's been fighting combat sports for over 20, 25 years, the biggest payday of his life. But either way, want to hear what you have to say about this down in the comments. Let me know if you agree with my analysis or if maybe you think that I'm completely off and you think that just both sports suck as a whole and they are just dying sports for where the transition is happening. Or if you think that this really could be the start of some style of celebrity matchups that we have yet to tap into. Either way, if you found value in this content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. I will see you in the next video.